My dad could take on roles and play them with a professionalism so profound that he was unrecognizable to me.
Since the Enterprise is obviously functional, I suggest we return to our starting place at once.
Aye, sir.
Wrong. Let's do it again.
Every movie and TV show leaves something on the cutting room floor. Some scenes deserve to stay buried. Others make you wonder why they were ever cut in the first place. Star Trek has plenty of both, hidden away on old tapes and discs, and waiting for fans to rediscover them. So settle in as we count down 10 deleted Star Trek scenes you need to see, from number 10 all the way to the one that never should have been cut. Number 10. Did Captain Picard use a bad word? Captain Picard does not curse. That is just not who he is. Except in one deleted scene from Star Trek Insurrection, he almost did. And the footage is one of the funniest things the franchise ever shot, and then buried. The scene runs longer than what aired, with Picard, Worf, and a Sona officer named Gallatin still talking things over right before the crew learns the Baku relocation has started up again aboard a ship called the Collector. Riker calls in from the Enterprise and delivers a line that did survive into the movie, telling Picard that the Council has ordered a halt to the relocation while they run a top-level review. In the finished film, Riker says this right after Picard has already saved the day, so it lands as a dry little joke at Starfleet's expense. Flip back to the unused footage, though, and it is Picard who hears those words first, long before any rescue happens, and he does not take it well. He fires back at Riker with actual anger in his voice, aimed straight at Starfleet and the Federation, snapping that a top-level review means nothing, and that there will be no cover-up. You almost never get to see Picard like this, stripped of his usual calm and just plain furious. The rest of the unused footage gets tangled fast. Picard and his crew spend several minutes working out how to disable the Collector instead of destroying it outright, and the plan becomes hard to follow unless you already know something about how the script used to end. In an earlier draft, the villain Ru'afo escapes the Collector and ages to death inside the planet's rings rather than dying when the ship blows up. Co-producer and unit director Peter Lauritsen said in the DVD extras that Paramount rejected this softer ending during post-production because it just did not deliver enough punch. As Lauritsen put it, the studio wanted more bang, and when a studio says that, you can bet they mean explosions. So the writers moved the line to Riker, reworked the ending around a bigger finish, and Picard's brush with profanity ended up nowhere near theaters. One small change in who says a line and when completely flips whether a moment lands as comedy or as rage. And while we are on the subject of insurrection footage that never made it past the editing room, there is another cut scene from the same film that fans still bring up online. Number 9. The kiss Paramount decided was one too many. Star Trek Insurrection gave Picard an actual love interest, which is something the franchise rarely bothered with. Her name is Anij, played by Donna Murphy, a member of the long-lived Baku people who live on a planet that slows aging to almost nothing. The finished film hints at real chemistry between the two of them, especially during a sequence where Anij slows down time itself so they can walk together, while everyone else around them keeps moving at normal speed. What most people do not know is how much further this romance was supposed to go on screen. Producer Rick Berman, speaking years later, said 2 separate kisses between Picard and Anij were filmed and then pulled from the finished movie. The first one happens during that slowed-down sequence, with water and even a hummingbird seemingly frozen mid-air around the couple. Berman explained that several people on the production felt uneasy about that particular kiss because it happens in the middle of an urgent evacuation, with everyone else rushing to escape danger, and stopping for romance in the middle of all that craziness made little sense. But even though Berman's point made some sense, Donna Murphy wasn't exactly thrilled when she learned that both kisses had been cut. She described the slow-motion sequence as something closer to a sensual exploration between the two characters, full of small touches and heightened awareness that built naturally toward the kiss itself. When she found out the studio had removed it, she figured it must have been done to give more weight to a different kiss later in the film. And she admitted she was caught off guard by the decision, since actors tend to build an entire performance around scenes they assume will stay in the story. Lauritsen also spoke about the footage, saying that the slow-motion kiss simply did not work once everyone saw it cut together, even though it read fine on paper during the writing stage. Watching it now, there is something to that. All the blinking eyes and stretched-out motion ends up feeling less romantic and honestly more strange. Number 8. The girlfriend nobody knew Archer had. Captain Jonathan Archer never got much of a love life on screen during Star Trek Enterprise. Fans caught a few hints here and there, but nothing really steady that suggested he had a relationship outside his career. That almost changed in the second season finale called The Expanse, and the cut footage proves it. In the deleted scenes, Archer walks through the streets of San Francisco shortly after Earth gets hit by a mysterious Xindi probe that kills millions of people. He passes vehicles that look like a cross between a small car and a golf cart, then walks into a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown that sits mostly empty because people are staying home in the wake of the attack. A maitre d' named Tommy, greets him warmly, clearly recognizing him from earlier visits, and lets him know the woman he is meeting has already arrived. That woman is Becky, played by actress Serena Scott Thomas, and the two of them clearly go back a while. After some easy back and forth, Archer apologizes for running late, and the pair share a kiss. Becky jokes that she will let a fortune cookie decide whether Archer gets invited back to her apartment afterward. The scene got cut because the finished episode ran 10 minutes too long, and editors had to make tough calls about what stayed. Scott Bakula, who played Archer, spoke favorably about the character at the time, saying he thought there was a real chance fans might see Becky again once the crew made it back to Earth, and that the relationship could have opened up new directions for the show going forward. There is one more detail tying Becky to something fans already loved about Archer. According to the official novelization of the episode, written by author J.M. Dillard, Becky's mother was the original breeder behind Porthos, Archer's pet beagle. The novelization explains that Porthos came from a litter of 4 puppies, all named after the musketeers from the classic novel by Alexandre Dumas, which means Porthos shared his original litter with brothers named Athos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan. The most famous dog in the franchise turns out to have a real connection to a deleted romance most fans never even knew existed. Number 7. The birth that almost opened the movie. Most fans know exactly one version of how Spock came into the world, and that is the strange vision his half-brother Sibok creates inside Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, where Sarek holds his newborn son in a cave-like setting. But a different version of that same birth was filmed for an entirely different movie, and it almost opened the 2009 Star Trek film before being cut. The deleted scene takes place in the Vulcan city of Shikar, where the cries of a newborn baby echo across the desert. The setup stays deliberately vague for casual viewers, the same way a similar birth scene plays out for young Kirk earlier in the film. An unnamed human mother, clearly meant to be Amanda Grayson, lies with her newborn son, while an unnamed Vulcan father arrives home just afterward. That father is Sarek, played by actor Ben Cross, and he gently suggests naming the child after one of Vulcan's early society builders, a man named Spock. Even though the full scene never made it into theaters, pieces of it slipped into trailers and television spots before the movie's release, so sharp-eyed fans actually caught a preview of footage that would later get cut entirely. There is a small wrinkle buried in this scene, too. The movie states on screen that Spock was born in 2230, but the original animated series episode called Yesteryear had already set his birth year as 2233, the same year the new film gives Kirk. Since the deleted scene happens before the villain, Nero's time-traveling attack splits the timeline in two. It technically applies to both the original timeline fans had known for decades and the new one the 2009 film created. The scene also sits a little awkwardly next to the version of Spock's birth shown in Star Trek V, since that one happens inside a cave rather than under an open desert sky. But Star Trek has never lost much sleep over small contradictions like that. Filmmakers decided the scene felt heavy-handed once placed alongside the other flashbacks already built into the movie, the ones covering young Spock and young Kirk's early years. So it got trimmed for pacing rather than for any lack of quality. Number 6. Picard's accent. Jean-Luc Picard has one of the most recognizable voices in science fiction television. That crisp and proper English accent that somehow belongs to a man born and raised in France. For a very long time, fans joked about the mismatch without ever getting a real answer, until a deleted scene from Star Trek Picard finally addressed it head-on. In the unused footage, shot for the very first episode of the series, Picard walks through the vineyards at his family home in France with his pit bull, who answers to the name Number 1. At one point during the walk, the dog brings Picard a dead bird, a small, oddly charming detail that did not survive into the broadcast version. As they continue on, Picard spots two of his vineyard workers mocking Laris, a Romulan woman who lives and works on the property. He switches into French and tears into them on the spot, defending her without a second of hesitation. Patrick Stewart actually tried a French accent for Picard once before, all the way back during casting for Star Trek: The Next Generation in the 1980s. The original casting call described Picard as speaking with a mid-Atlantic accent, with a Gallic tone only appearing when his emotions ran high. That loose description gave producer Robert Justman enough room to cast Stewart, even over creator Gene Roddenberry's early hesitation about the choice, which ultimately wiped out any real French sound from the character for good. The deleted French scene kind of reminds us of an earlier and far lighter moment from Star Trek: The Next Generation, the episode 11001001, where Picard danced with Riker on the holodeck while trying to teach him a French minuet. His pronunciation in that scene had enough small errors that the line actually had to be rewritten for the French-dubbed version of the episode, since the original dialogue did not hold up once translated back into the language Picard was supposedly speaking fluently the whole time. As for why Picard sounds English despite his French roots, the show eventually gave fans a real explanation inside the story itself. In the Star Trek Picard Season 2 episode Watcher, Picard tells fellow traveler Agnes Jurati that his family survived World War II by hiding in tunnels beneath their vineyard during the Nazi occupation before fleeing to England for safety, which is where his branch of the family picked up the English accent over the decades that followed. It took the franchise more than 30 years to answer a question fans had been asking since the very beginning, and the deleted vineyard scene with Number 1 nearly got there first. Number 5. The Jump. Captain James T. Kirk spent decades commanding starships, but one deleted scene shows him trying an extreme stunt that almost opened Star Trek Generations before editors pulled it entirely. The footage was meant to kick off the prologue. While the camera stays on familiar shots of a floating bottle of Dom Perignon champagne drifting through zero gravity aboard the newly built Enterprise B, the scene cuts down to Earth, where Montgomery Scott and Pavel Chekhov stand outside staring up at the sky, trying to spot their old friend. Kirk, it turns out, is in the middle of an orbital skydive, falling from space itself toward the planet below. When he finally lands, Chekhov reports that Kirk missed his exact target by 35 meters, delivered in the kind of clipped tone you would normally expect from Spock, rather than Chekhov. In that short scene, you could feel the warmth and touch of sadness once you know what happens later in the film. During the conversation, it becomes clear Kirk has refused to set foot aboard a starship since retiring from Starfleet, which makes his eventual return to active duty during the movie hit a little harder in hindsight. Director David Carson explained that the skydiving sequence got cut because it made the opening feel too heavy, and it slowed the story down before the real plot had a chance to start. Even so, the scene survived elsewhere, turning up as a bonus feature on the Generations Special Edition home video release, inside the official novelization, and even in a comic book adaptation made around the same time. There is actually a second deleted scene tied to this same stretch of the story that fans rarely bring up. Later in the unused footage, after the crew mistakenly believes Kirk has died during a rescue mission gone wrong, Chekhov sits at his post on the bridge visibly crying, while Scotty reflects on how much they may have just lost during what was supposed to be a routine shakedown cruise. Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, shared later that he genuinely enjoyed filming that scene because it gave his character a rare chance to really grief on screen. The skydiving suit Kirk wore for his jump did not just disappear once the scene got cut. It was reused for a similar stunt performed by B'Elanna Torres during a dangerous holographic training exercise on Star Trek Voyager in the episode Extreme Risk, which gave one piece of unused costume design a second life on an entirely different show years later. Number 4. The Data Wine Toast. Some deleted scenes feel like a missing puzzle piece once you finally watch them. And that is exactly the case with a short conversation between Picard and his android officer Data, cut from Star Trek Nemesis. The scene happens early in the movie, not long after a wedding between Riker and Deanna Troi, as Picard and Data share a glass of wine from the family vineyard back home in France, the wine the franchise now sells as Chateau Picard. Patrick Stewart introduced the scene himself on the home media release, explaining that Picard and Data spend this moment talking about the things that eventually touch every life: change, growth, loss, friendship, and family. Stewart said the conversation would echo through the rest of the film and would become more meaningful during the last 10 or 15 minutes once the story reaches its end. Placing the scene right after a wedding was no accident either. The film spends its opening stretch celebrating new beginnings before slowly turning toward loss. And this small toast between two old friends sits right at that turning point. That setup turns out to be exactly right. Later in the movie, Data sacrifices his own life to save Picard and the rest of the crew, destroying an enemy weapon at the cost of his own existence. After the loss, Picard gathers his senior officers and raises a glass, speaking the words to absent friends, to family. It is the exact same toast Kirk once gave in Spock's honor after his death back in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, which means the cut wine scene with Data was setting up a callback that most viewers never even clocked. Riker follows the toast with his own tribute, recalling the very first time he met Data, leaning against a tree on the holodeck while trying and failing to whistle a tune correctly. The real Chateau Picard wine, created years later as official Star Trek merchandise, actually quotes a line straight from this deleted scene on its back label, where Picard reflects that a winemaker's history lives inside every glass he pours, defined by where he came from and what he hopes for in the future. Wine was not the only thing connected to family history nearly cut from Star Trek lore, since one of the most gifted singers ever to wear a Starfleet uniform almost lost an entire performance to the editing room floor as well. Number 3. Beyond Antares Song. Before Nichelle Nichols ever stepped onto the bridge as Lieutenant Uhura, she spent years as a professional singer and dancer, touring early in her career with Duke Ellington's band. We were given a glimpse of that background in one of the most striking pieces of footage anyone has rescued from old Star Trek film reels. In the original series episode, The Conscience of the King, Uhura plays a Vulcan lute and sings a song called Beyond Antares to comfort a lonely crew member over the ship's intercom. The song was written specifically for the episode, with music by Wilbur Hatch and lyrics credited to writer Gene L. Kuhn. Nichols spoke fondly about the recording session years later, saying the song felt like something genuinely ethereal, and that pulling her voice down slightly during the performance gave it a warmer, throatier quality that suited the mood. She also praised the musicians who backed her in the studio, including guitarist Lorindo Almeida, whose playing she remembered as simply beautiful. When the Blu-ray set Star Trek, the original series, The Roddenberry Vault, finally surfaced in 2016 for the show's 50th anniversary, fans discovered an alternate take of this exact performance buried in footage nobody had seen since the day it was shot. In this version, the camera stays on Nichols far longer, capturing an extended performance with an additional verse of the song that exists nowhere else. It shows up inside a special feature on the set called Swept Up Snippets from the Cutting Room Floor, alongside other small fragments pulled from the same stack of old film canisters. There is one more piece of footage tied to this song, buried in deleted material from the third season episode, Elean of Troyes. In that unused scene, Uhura asks Spock to teach her how to properly play the Vulcan lute, after learning he once placed second in an actual Vulcan music competition back home. It never made it to air, but it was beautiful to see these two characters who rarely got time to talk outside of bridge duty, somewhat bonding. The full, uncut version of Beyond Antares did eventually reach fans, just not through the television series itself. In 1991, La La Land Records released a complete audio recording of the song as part of a Star Trek: The Original Series soundtrack collection, giving longtime fans a way to finally hear the whole piece even before the matching video resurfaced years later. Sometimes the music outruns the picture by decades, and that turned out to be true for one of the most affecting musical performances in the entire franchise. Number 2. The plot twist, Palama's pregnancy. There are quite a sizable amount deleted scenes from the Star Trek franchise, but very few carry as much real drama as the one cut from the classic episode Who Mourns for Adonais, and the story behind why it got pulled tells you a lot about what television could and could not get away with in the late 1960s. The episode follows the crew of the Enterprise as they run into a being claiming to be the ancient Greek god Apollo, who becomes fixated on Lieutenant Carolyn Palamas, a young officer specializing in archaeology and mythology. Apollo eventually loses his powers once his temple is destroyed and fades away on the wind, while a heartbroken Palamas watches him go. Writer Gilbert Ralston originally scripted a bold ending for the story, one where Dr. McCoy makes a discovery after Palamas returns from her time alone with Apollo on the planet below. In the scripted and fully filmed bridge scene, McCoy walks up to Kirk and Spock looking troubled, then tells them Palamas is pregnant. Kirk, stunned, asks if Apollo is the father, and McCoy confirms it, closing the scene with a haunting line, wondering aloud what the child will become, a man or a god. That twist survived every single draft of the script, all the way through production, and the creative team genuinely loved it. Later, writer Dorothy Fontana explained that NBC's Broadcast Standards Department simply refused to let the storyline air, since the idea of a pregnancy resulting from intercourse outside marriage felt far too controversial for network television at the time. Even though Star Trek had already snuck plenty of other boundary-pushing material past the censors over the years. The crew had already wrapped filming on nearly everything else for the episode by the time word came down that the scene had to go, leaving only Kirk, Spock, and McCoy still needed for the handful of lines that were never broadcast. The scene was unseen for nearly 50 years until it resurfaced as part of the 2016 Roddenberry Vault Blu-ray set, tucked inside a documentary segment exploring footage Gene Roddenberry had personally kept after the show wrapped production. Actress Leslie Parrish, who played Palamas, came back decades later to talk about the rediscovered footage and reflected on how strange it felt to revisit a storyline that had been hidden away for almost her entire adult life. The pregnancy idea never fully vanished from Star Trek lore either. Author James Blish kept the twist in his official novelization of the episode shortly after it aired, and years later, novelist Peter David built an entire character in his Star Trek New Frontier book series around a descendant of Palamas and Apollo's child. Once you realize censors could reach into a finished, fully filmed scene and yank it before broadcast, it makes you wonder how many other character moments never survived that same process, including one final deleted scene that touches the very start of two of the most famous friendships in the franchise. Number 1. The childhood scenes that almost made the reboot land even harder. Some deleted scenes simply entertain you, and some genuinely make you wonder how different an entire film might have felt with just a few extra minutes left in. This one falls into the second group, and it almost changed how an entire generation of fans first got to know young Spock and young Kirk. The 2009 Star Trek film gives us quick flashes of both boys growing up. Young Spock deals with bullying because of his mixed heritage, and young Kirk grows up fast without a father in his life. Honestly, both stories feel a little rushed in the final cut, like the movie wanted to slow down and tell us more, but kept getting pulled back to the main plot. Turns out that is basically what happened. Several extra scenes covering this same ground got filmed and then cut before the movie hit theaters, and they fill in gaps the finished version barely touches on. One scene in particular comes to mind. It shows Amanda Grayson, Spock's human mother, having a real disagreement with Sarek about how their son should handle being bullied by other Vulcan kids. Amanda wants Spock to embrace his Vulcan side, sure, but she also tells Sarek there is nothing wrong with her son acting human sometimes too, even if that just means walking away from a fight instead of standing his ground through pure logic. It is a small moment, but it says a lot because we rarely get to see Spock's parents disagree about anything, let alone something as personal as how to raise a kid who never quite fits into either world. Film critic and longtime Star Trek writer Jordan Hoffman dug into a batch of these deleted childhood scenes years after the movie came out. One sequence, he said, really drives home how close Spock stayed to his mother growing up, which makes her death later in the story hit so much harder. Hoffman figured cutting most of these scenes probably helped the film move faster overall, but he admitted this particular one probably should have stayed, since it added weight without slowing the pace down much. He even joked that editors basically have to kill their darlings sometimes, and given the subject matter here, that line landed a bit too on the nose. There is more cut footage from the same shoot too, this time following the villain Nero through the 25 years he spent waiting and plotting his revenge before the story even kicks off. It is interesting stuff, but most fans and critics agree the finished film works better without stopping to explain all of that. Put it all together, and you start to see just how much extra emotional groundwork got built into this movie before the studio trimmed it down for release. The film did just fine without these scenes, and plenty of people who doubted a reboot could respect decades of Star Trek history walked away happy anyway. But these deleted family moments prove there was even more heart baked into the story than most of us ever got to see. And that wraps up 10 Star Trek deleted scenes you really needed to see. Sure, some of these cuts made the final films and episodes stronger, but others honestly deserved a real shot on screen. So, which deleted scene on this list do you think never should have been cut in the first place? And if you could bring back just one scene for good, which one would you pick? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.